Welcome everyone to class number 2 for the Constellations for Individuals 2021 class. Good to see you all here. My guess is we're expecting a couple more people. So just take a moment, come to yourself. I don't know what kind of a day you've had. I've had kind of a wacky day. You may have had a very simple day. You may just be waking up. Again, some of you, it may be the middle of the night. And allow a word or a phrase just to come into your heart that honors how you are right now. And you don't have to change it. You don't have to make yourself feel better if you feel crappy. You don't have to get deeper if you're feeling superficial. Just whatever you're feeling is fine. And then popcorn style, just lean forward, unmute, say your name and your word or phrase, just to set the space.
Suzanne, tired and scrambling to wake up.
This is Susan. I am feeling a little frazzled today.
Monica, in the end of my day, feeling a little tired.
Andrea, glad to be sitting.
And this is Diane, and I'm feeling a little scattered but alert.
Tammy, and I'm feeling pulled.
Brandy, if I have to jump up and get one more thing, I'm going to scream.
I'm on vacation, Kathleen, sort of. Squeezed into a teardrop trailer, bathed by the sea, glad to be here.
This is Laura. I'm feeling a little shaky.
Sheila, stressed and really upset about a conversation I just had with a friend.
Layla, and I have period cramps. I just got my period just an hour ago.
Roxanne,
Go ahead.
Happy to be here.
I'm Christina. I'm anticipatory for figurines.
I'm Alex. I've had a long day. It's 10 o'clock in the evening, but I feel alive and blessed.
This is Iris. I feel quite relaxed.
And I'm Leslie. I feel like I'm in a pivot. Did some really heavy lifting earlier today, and I prefer being with all of you. So it's nice to be with all of you. Anybody else? Did I get everybody? Okay, good. So obviously in a large enough group like this, there's going to be a wide variety, you know, from woohoo to right, in any group. And there is a note of tenderness. So we'll just notice that without having to make it any different. Well, yeah. So thank you everyone, wherever you are, for showing up today. Like, you could have done something else for the next 3 hours. So I'm glad you're here. Thank you for being here with whatever's in your heart. So I want to do an opening meditation as usual. This will be brief. I think this might be useful for some of you, or well, for all of us in one way or another, but in some ways more, for some of you more particularly. I just want us as a group to connect with the land, which is common enough constellations work. Um, Nothing cutting edge about this, but it's always good to return to it. So I invite you to just take a moment again, just notice how you're feeling. And, maybe hearing the system a little bit, it shifted a little bit. Like, oh, I'm in this group. Notice the others as well as yourself. And then take a moment and just notice the land beneath your feet, whether immediately below your feet or several floors below your feet. Just notice it. Again, you don't have to change anything. I live on a hill. I'm noticing the hill. And notice whatever arises in you when you slow down enough to notice you and the land, this particular bit of land. And invite you in the way that Constellations makes possible. At a conscious level, this is pretty crazy, but at kind of the extended consciousness level of Constellations work, we can do this. Notice the stretch of time and the people who have been on this land before you. All the way from the people who may have lived in the apartment before you did, or the house, or wherever you are, all the way back to the first people who ever walked on this spot of land. The waves of habitation and migration and history. The tears, the laughter, the solemnity, the humor, everything. And just notice you're the latest one in the lineage of this bit of land. You have a lot of land ancestors. And there will be those who will follow us. Take your place in that community. You're here now. And then again, with another shift of consciousness, become aware of the other 20 or so bits of land that your colleagues are at today, the other ones in this class. Notice those bits of land and their histories, and how those lands fuel us, support us. And as we bring great consciousness and love and attention to the lands, I ask our lands to support us today for these next 3 hours and beyond. And in whatever way the lands respond to my petition, I give thanks. invite you all to come back. Thank you. So I want to start out for just a few minutes, as I do, I'm going to do for all the remaining classes. It's just for a little bit of open time, mostly for people to share or ask questions for those of you who are able to get around to the homework. And if you didn't, that's fine. No shame spiraling here, no guilt. But if you did, and you want to share about that, or you have a question about it, it's always nice to hear like someone had an amazing experience and they share it with the group. That's always really nice. Or as I say, a really useful failure is always really nice to get questions about. And any other questions that may be on your mind, including, you know, shares from the meditation we just did, if there's anything that needs to be spoken. But we have, you know, about 10 minutes here to do a little open questioning and sharing. So anything from the group, just go ahead and go like this, or unmute and start speaking if no one else is speaking. Yes, Suzanne's got one.
I did a process with a client a couple of days ago. I didn't actually stand on the markers, but I touched the markers because we're doing it on Zoom. So I got her to put them down on the floor. In fact, I used chairs.
Okay.
Still grounding, and it was about 4 different choices she has. Right. And so I did it blind, so she told me what all the options were.
That's
so
a
she
good
was
way to go with options constellations, to do them blind.
Yeah, and so it was very interesting what came out of that, because she's very up in her head and trying to figure out what she's going to do. And she came in, you know, saying, oh, I've done this and that in our profile. And I said, let's put all that aside and let's see what other information can come to you. And out of it just came, interestingly, something that was in the middle that she wouldn't have considered, that was in the middle of all those options, that was going to be something new. And she'd started out the session saying, I feel like I'm lost in the forest. I don't know which way I'm going. And where we wound up with was she's in a new space. So, of course, it's got to come to her as much as her figuring it out. But she got a lot of new, different information.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. A couple of things I want to lift up with that share. One is that you're improvising with the format, which I recommend to everybody. So bravo. You sort of did it on both sides in an interesting way. And then and chairs are always interesting because they start getting up to the size of bodies, right? So you start to feel like there are entities in the room. So that's a really nice sort of adjustment as well. And then just, this isn't about one-on-one constellations, but just for people who are new, what Suzanne is talking about is a structural format called options constellations, where people are choosing between A, B, C, D, and E, or, you know, Harvard, Wesleyan, University of Minnesota. I don't know which to go to, right? And you can set them up. It is very useful to do those blind, so that you don't know which one you're stepping on or which one you're getting information about. And very frequently, I could say a lot about options constellations, and I will control myself and not do that. But one thing that it can be useful is, in addition to the options, is always put in one wild card, which is basically, it sounds like where it ended up, because it could be A, B, C, or other, the option the client has not thought of yet, right? So it can be useful to bring in another representation, just to make sure that they, in case they don't have all the options on the table. Yeah.
Could I just add something, Leslie? Because I wanted to include that, and then she had 4, and I left it at that. But she found her own.
Yeah, exactly. It'll happen that way too.
Prompting her, she started to move towards them, thinking, "Now, where am I in the space?" Like she took herself there, and she went, "I'm right in the middle." It was like a revelation. It was so good.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that the field provided the wild card via her sensitivity and trusting you. That's really great. Thank you.
Question
Andrea.
for Suzanne.
Sheila, yeah, I'm sorry.
Question for Suzanne about that. I'm just curious, Suzanne, if you were representing in the chairs or if the client was moving between.
She was, but I mapped out, we did north, south, east, west, where she was. And as she went there, I put my hand on them. So I had just a couple of additional things that I just wrote down and put to the side, but later shared when she'd shared. I shared what I was also sensing. So I did feel into them as well, but didn't stand on them. I hope that was okay, Leslie.
That's one of our options, which is have them represent, you represent, or both of you represent. And a certain amount of, and it could be you do some, I do some, or, I mean, the options are infinite. And you make those decisions based upon your strengths, the client's capacities, and what seems to unfold in the constellation. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Good question, Sheila. Andrea, you had your hand up. Yeah.
So that is kind of what happened to me. I put the floor markers in my space and asked the client to place them. Where would she like them roughly? And one of the markers was for her grandmother with whom she had no relationship.
Well, that's always a tell, right?
Yeah. So it turned out that she actually had an object given to her by her grandmother. So I invited her to bring it into the room. And then the constellation like jumped into her space with her holding the object and reporting out. So then there was less for me to do. But I also want to say there was a deeper learning at first I didn't realize what had happened. It took me a day to think about it. I thought it was an error that it jumped into her space. And then I realized something else. At the very end, as soon as we reached what I thought was the conclusion, and we agreed that the constellation was over, she said to me, "Oh, and I have to tell you about 2 other constellations I had recently." And I was like, stop, wait, let it land at least before you tell me more. So it took me 2 days to figure out that what she actually was telling me was 2 things that were very related to the work that we'd done, and they were related to future constellations she should do or would do. They were pieces of valuable information.
Yeah.
So that was mind-blowing.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. I love to hear people sort of diving in and going, oh, I learned this and this and this. That's great. That's great. There's no other way to do it. You got to dive in. Other questions or shares? Yeah, Kathleen. Yeah.
I actually did mine over the phone because of some logistical considerations and did not really use paper. I'm finding the sense of standing in a piece of paper just, I don't know, doesn't feel exactly aligned for me. But in any case, what we both did is we each chose objects for the constellation. And then we represented each, and then we shared photographs of the objects, which then became its own another layer, if you will, to see the correlation between the 2 objects that we chose each for the issues. I don't know, it was fascinating to see what happens when you see the correlation between 2 objects that you can't see and you're representing blind because we're on the phone.
Right.
And then to see the exchange of images. It was, I found it worked really well.
I really love that, the need to adapt to some different media made you creative and brought out field information and subtleties that might not have been available if you had done it some standardized way. And it starts to feel a little bit like the kind of work some people who are more artistically inclined than I am do around kind of constellation artwork or mind mapping or collaging, that kind of way of working in the field, which is not my forte because I've got a story about not being an artist. it sounds like it came through a little bit there, using what a phone can do, which is these days phones can take pictures. So that's really cool. That's really interesting. Yeah, I can imagine you look at the pictures and go, oh, symbolically they have these things in common. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's great. That's cool. Yeah, that's awesome. And my guess is that that kind of experimentation, what I really want for everybody here is to find your strengths. I can only demonstrate the way I do it, and so I do it from my strengths, but I want you all to do it your way. Take what you're seeing here and play with it for yourself. Yeah. Other questions or shares? Yeah?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, Fiona, go ahead.
Oh yeah, hi. I did a constellation with a colleague that I had been practicing with before, and I'd asked her to do something simple, so she'd picked irritation at traffic and stuff, but it actually turned out to be her mother, and there was this whole collective trauma behind it, and I was representing her mother and also her younger self, it turned out to be, because I found I was kind of looking down. So she asked me, are you looking down at me, when I was turning towards her representative as her mother? And I said, no, I think you're just a small version of you. And so then, yeah, when I turned eventually as the representative of her mother towards what was pulling me backwards, there was just a lot of bodies, and it resonated with her. And I had thought I had locked my door, but I hadn't. And my son came in looking for a shovel just at that time, kind of, which was a bit, I don't know what that means.
Well, a shovel and lots of bodies.
Yes, of all the things. Well, it only occurred to me actually today. It was like, oh, he came in looking for a shovel. Not only did he come in, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes we have to be careful. Sometimes a
I
cigar is just a
know.
cigar, but so
I
often the
know.
field recruits this stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And I also found, actually, I was going to question that.
Yeah.
As the representative of her mother, I found myself saying it wasn't our fault. I wasn't quite right, but it was like I didn't actually do it, but
Yeah.
they still belong or something. So I just wondered about that, if you've any sort of, I don't know, better words or something for if it ever happened again.
You know,
Or
because
is
I
it-
don't have the story and I don't know the
Yes,
situation,
yeah,
I can feel what you can feel about it being close, but not quite. I can feel
yes,
that with you, but I can't come up with what it is because I would need a little bit more story, which I'm not sure I want to.
yeah, no, I mean, she didn't even tell me what. She just resonated. Yeah, there were bodies.
Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, something is coming through a little bit like we tried our best.
Yeah, that might have, yeah.
Something like that.
There
We couldn't have
was nothing more we could have done or something.
something
That's
along those
what you
lines.
meant,
Again, it's not
Barbara.
quite there, but it's
Yeah,
close.
okay.
I can
Thank
feel
you.
it with you. And that's the nice thing. You know, you can even like if you have, you know, you only have 80% of a sentence,
Mm-hmm.
go ahead and speak it. You can literally say, I don't think this is the whole thing, but it's close. And
Okay.
then say it. And sometimes the other person will fix it for you.
Right. I'd
They,
forgotten that. Yes.
they can
That's a
feel
good.
it.
Yes.
Yeah. You
Okay.
don't worry about saying it wrong. All you have to do is like, that was wrong. I take it back.
I'm not sure it was totally wrong, but I suppose it's that whole thing of women's role within maybe war situations or something where they haven't actually um, committed anything or done anything, but it was a collective. Yeah, I don't know.
Another sentence that's coming through is it was too big for us.
Okay.
Just kind of a classic Hellinger, right?
Yeah.
It was too big
Okay.
for us.
Thanks, Leslie. Thanks.
Because so often the survivor guilt, this is such a common trope in constellations, I might as well just say this out loud, that some terrible thing happened that we weren't able to prevent, and guilt gets stuck in the system around that. right? So the notion of fault, who's at fault, gets caught up in there. So the irritation she experiences, right? So at any rate, just to name that a little bit. Okay, thank you. For those of you who didn't get around to it, please don't, there's no test. And invite you, down the road to jump on in if you're able to. And to practice each of the formats as the formats, not because you'll end up liking all of the formats and using them, but just so you can feel what it's like. Yeah. And then you'll find the 2 or 3 that are the best fit for you. A couple of reminders before we dive into some of our material today. I just want to say this once again. I won't repeat this material again, but it seems useful sometimes. That this is a short adult level instructional course. I can give a little bit of mentoring, but not in-depth mentoring or, big healing. And it's appropriately messy and aimed at adult professional learners. So that's kind of what we're up to today. Presupposition that we're all bringing our best, right? And that we'll care for each other as we go along in the tenderness of the practice. And a presupposition mostly that we'll be taking care of ourselves as we go along, including not making ourselves more vulnerable than we can kind of, appropriately handle in a class like this. Again, the group is at lots of different levels. If you're thinking this is going really slow, if you're like, oh my God, I can't track, it's too fast. Hopefully most people are finding it more or less in the right place. And finally, I'm really always open to feedback about how this is going for you. Just shoot me emails, okay? At the end, I'll ask for evaluations, but as we're going along, if there's something that you need to check in with me about, just send me an email, let me know. And then finally, of course, confidentiality, the field that we're creating here as colleagues, we're creating the community we want to have here together. So thank you for being part of that. It's quite exciting. Okay, so every time I do a little bit of a review, bit of material. Last time it was just talking a little bit about what one-on-one constellations are and how they compare to group constellations. Today I want to do, and my apologies to those of you who have been in this work a lot. Hopefully, even when I'm doing review material, I'm saying it in a way that it lands in a slightly different or new way, and so that's useful for you. Yeah. So I want to do, because it's so critical, I want to do a little review on the orders of love and conscience and belonging. We're not going to do it super long. Question about pets. Are they being recruited? Yes, they get recruited all the time. Although again, there's a little bit of sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. My cat Rufus always likes to chase the pieces of paper on the ground because he likes attention. I used to interpret his participation as part of the field, and now I lock him in my bedroom. Because he just really likes chasing the pieces of paper. So yes, they get recruited. I saw some remarkable ones for another conversation about some dogs at a horse constellation. Was just incredible how they were getting recruited. So yes, they do. They're very sensitive. They can feel, they're mammals, so they're always feeling the emotional tone of the system. They have all that limbic capacity that we have. Okay, so I'm going to share screen here. If you cannot see this, please, loading, there we go. If you can't see this, speak up. Say, I can't see this, so that I know someone can't see it. But we're going to look at the orders of love. And I say for the family, as I mentioned briefly last time, all systems are self-organizing. Yeah, the solar system, gravity, the planets circle the sun, the moon circles the planets. Yeah. the solar system is not sheer chaos. It's not anything is happening. It's got certain self-organizing principles. Every system has self-organizing principles, and the family is no different in this regard. They are not exactly the same for other kinds of systems like organizations or like natural systems. Very frequently, people make the mistake of applying family orders of love to other kinds of systems, and they get themselves in some trouble. Again, this training is not to be comprehensive about all that, but I do want to alert you to it if that's news. Bert Hellinger introduced the orders of love. The joke I always like to make about our dear founder is that he was systemic but not systematic. So deep systemic thinker, but he didn't organize his work. This was left to other people to do. So if you look at a list of the orders of love for the family, you'll probably see slightly different lists in different places, because Bert Hellinger himself didn't come up with one definitive list. Yeah, this is mine. This is pretty comprehensive. This is pretty much what you will see out there in other people's books and as you read Bert Hellinger. So the first one, there really isn't a hierarchy here, except in that this first one does kind of come first, which is honoring and including what is. We've all seen what happens in families when what is not honored and included. And the power, the sheer power of what happens when we include something that has not been included. Yeah. I just say respect for reality because one organizational constellations book once called it that, and I rather liked that. I thought that was a nice way to talk about it. The second one is belonging. This is kind of a tautology, but whoever belongs in a system belongs in a system, and whoever doesn't, doesn't. In families, that's mostly about birth, but it's not only about birth. But birth is important because families throw out, get rid of, exclude members of the family all the time. And what we discover in constellations is that you can't throw people out, not at a systemic level. So when someone gets excluded or rejected, the system compensates in some way or another. So very often you will have a client who has a symptom, and it's their unconscious way of including someone who had been excluded. And when we include the excluded one, the client's symptom drops away. That's a really simple version of this, yeah? There are other ways to belong to each other. Murderers and victims belong to each other. War buddies belong to each other. There are lots of other ways. Of course, couples who get married belong to each other. So there are other ways to belong to each other that are really, really important. But with dealing with families, we're often prioritizing the fact that someone's born into the system and belongs. Seniority and role. Seniority is mostly in families about birth date. So those who are born earlier are senior, our ancestors are senior to us, our children are junior to us. This is not in any sense of better than, we should do whatever they say. It's not about authority per se, although it can be related to authority. Mostly it's about honoring and acknowledging the direction of the flow of life above all. That our parents give us life, not the other way around. So that if someday, this is the way one teacher put it once, your mother is in a nursing facility and you are changing her diapers and you're helping her, yeah, that's a good thing. We're glad you're helping your mom. The question is whether you're still holding her as your elder, as your senior, as the one who gave you life and not the other way around. If we can have the right stance about these things, about honoring our elders, then we can have freer choice about what we actually end up doing in terms of, making choices in our life. Role is related to this. The mothers are the mothers, the fathers, the aunts, the firstborn, etc., etc. We've all seen times when someone gets a role in the family that doesn't properly belong to them and the mischief that makes. Family feels better, the system feels better when everyone has their position and role. Balance of giving and taking. This comes more into play in peer relationships like couples, business partnerships, to a certain extent siblings, systems like a balance of giving and taking. If you're doing all the giving, that means someone else is having to do all the taking, and vice versa. When we can get a balance of giving and taking, the system tends to function better. So much more I could say about that. And then finally, the last one, taking responsibility and addressing transgressions. Systems go crazy when somebody did something really wrong and it was never acknowledged, there was no room for it, they got away with it, whatever it might be. Violations need to be acknowledged, addressed, taken responsibility for, without revenge. Revenge just keeps the cycle. Yeah. So this is really basic information. This becomes the reason why I really like to return to this is because phenomenology and intuition is a very big part of what we do. It showed up in that little bit of a conversation, I guess, with Fiona about that healing sentence. What was off about it? I didn't have any information about it, and I could kind of feel a little bit with her, right? So intuition and phenomenology is an important part of what we do, but it isn't, we are not completely lacking in frameworks and principles and structure that informs our perceptions. In my conversation with Fiona, one of the sentences I played with her was, "This is too big for me," which is a little bit of combining number 1 and number 3. Honoring what is and noticing what's bigger than us. Yeah? That comes from my, now deeply unconscious knowledge about the orders of love and how they live in me. And I don't have to refer to them consciously very much anymore as I'm working with clients and listening to representative reports. It becomes a diagnostic tool in the sense of, okay, so there's a dysfunction in the family, or there's a client problem, right? The client's coming to you with a problem of some sort or another. Is it possible that something is not being honored or included? Is it possible that someone is not getting to belong who should belong? Is there a problem with seniority, et cetera, et cetera? It becomes a way to sort of ask what is out of order. And this is, a lot of people are systemically, they've got some systemic training out there in the world, but they lack this framework. This is really powerful stuff. Once you start to have access to this, and then you go to work and, your 2 coworkers are arguing about something and it's driving you nuts, you can actually cycle through these and ask yourself, is it this? Is it this? Is it this? Yeah. And if you have access to enough information in the system, you might be able to understand why your 2 coworkers are, up against it. Yeah. Now, this is not a straitjacket. That's really important. But as I say, when in doubt, assume the orders of love, but not in a bullying way. You don't want to, one of the classic mistakes we've all either heard of, seen, or perhaps done ourselves is when we notice that a client is being too big in the system. They're trying to be bigger than their parents and heal the whole system. And we try and make the client be smaller. Yeah, because that would be good for them, right? And yet they're resisting it. What I want to say is that resistance, which I want to say is not my favorite word in the world, but it's part of the psychological world, so I use it because it's used a lot. Resistance to any good movement you are suggesting to the constellation at any given time is a sign that something has not been included yet. Probably a different order of love needs to be addressed first for some reason. In the case that I just offered up, before the client can be small in the system, perhaps some transgression needs to be acknowledged first. Yeah? Or something else. That's just an example. Yeah? So resistance is a sign the client is not being, resistant. The representative is not being resistant. It means something needs to be included that hasn't been included or acknowledged yet. Yeah. And this takes some practice and humility to work with over time, and making lots and lots of mistakes. Okay, there's something else I want to get to here. Yes. So the second thing I want to make sure we address here is these are the two core pieces: the orders of love and belonging and conscience. One of the great insights of Bert Hellinger: we feel innocent when we adhere to the rules of belonging. We feel guilty when we violate them. Now, this is not in the common sense, I feel guilty when I, hurt my girlfriend's feelings, that kind of guilt. This is a deeper kind of existential innocence and guilt. I really, the Godfather is such a good example of this. Michael Corleone wrestling with whether he wants to follow in his, family's footsteps or not. And the innocence he steps into when he decides to protect his father and to stay in the mafia, and indeed to take a leadership role in it. It's kind of a beautiful example of this. Now, there are different layers of belonging. In family constellations, we're usually dealing with families, right? Family belonging is core, probably the biggest belonging influence any of us have. Pretty much anything else is going to come second to the impact of family belonging. However, there are different layers of belonging, which can be messy, but it's often the way that we grow. Different constellation theorists offer different versions of these overlapping kinds of belonging, but this is Hellinger's from Love's Hidden Symmetry. He says that there are three kinds of belonging. There's the personal conscience with respect to a specific person, like our mother. There's systemic conscience with respect to a group, like our family or our culture. And then there's what he calls the conscience of the greater whole, which might be humanity or cosmos. Yeah. And these all come into, there are many other kinds of belonging: religious belongings, national belongings, gender belongings, age belongings, generational belongings. Yeah. Hobby belongings, employment and career identity. Yeah. There are all kinds of belongings, and they come into conflict, right? So the example I like to offer up is Sunday morning, and the family that always goes to church on Sunday, but whose daughter is excelling in soccer, has a soccer match. And they have to decide whether they're going to go to the soccer match or to the church service. There's no right or wrong answer to this, but the conflict is going to force them to make some choices and decide on their values. This is a good thing. And this is often what we're up to in constellations. When somebody has a change or a transformation, yeah, in a constellation, when something resolves or moves, it's because we've been able to bring into kind of a locked, limited system with a locked and limited sense of what's possible or true or excellent or okay. Yeah. We've been able to find another level of belonging for the client, which expands the menu in a sense for the client. And now they can look at the family belonging in a different kind of a way, without being in violation to the belonging of the family, without being disloyal, and yet having more choice than they had available before. Yeah. And this is often functionally what's happening in constellations work. Okay. So that is my little lecture for today. Any quick questions or comments or shares about that? I see Sheila and then Christina.
Well, Leslie, I was really struck today as you were talking about the phrase orders of love.
Yeah.
And I realized that for years I have assumed when I heard this phrase that it meant order in the sense of like putting things in order, putting things in their place, putting things in organization. But as you were talking, I actually questioned that interpretation somewhat, and I was wondering if you would speak to what that phrase means to you, or how to hold that phrase.
It can show up that way. It can certainly show up that way. You know, I had a client who for years understood herself to be the firstborn, and it turned out that her mother had had a child who had been adopted out before her. And when she finally owned the role of secondborn, she went, "Oh my God, I finally feel like myself." Yeah, so there's a way of getting into order. She was out of order, named as the first. She feels in order as the second. So it can take that form. The way I like to call it is, I mean, I like the word orders just because it's Bert Hellinger's word, and so that connects me with our founder. Um, um, but patterning or rhythms, um, organization in the sense of principles of self-organization in the way that, you know, I've got some sunflowers here, you know, the way plants are patterned, yeah, rather than just chaos. Yeah. So all of that comes under that rubric. Does that address some of what's coming up for you?
It does. I mean, I guess I also heard it as an order can be a command or an edict or and I wondered if that was at all how that phrase was meant. And I had just never considered it before today.
Yeah. Again, it can a little bit, but it's not limited to that. So it comes from the German Ordnung, and constellations comes from the word Aufstellung, which means arrangement. And sometimes we've all felt this. There's a way in which a family or system coming into better arrangement is an expression of some fidelity or obedience to some larger pattern. Yeah. But it's not this version, and it's not blind. It's not, you know, autocracy. It's part of the natural arrangements of life. And we could say, we could have an argument about the sunflower being organized that way, but it's kind of a silly argument. That's how they're organized. It's kind of the way that I feel into it. Yeah, with a lot of mushy room for culture and, you know, I mean, and this part of the brain and history and all that stuff. Yeah, because we're not sunflowers. We're, with all respect to sunflowers, we're a little more complicated than sunflowers. Yeah. But yeah, it's not military obedience, if that's helpful again, Sheila. Yeah? Okay. Let you keep chewing on that. Christina.
Thank you. I think that my question is a little bit of an extension of what you were just talking about regarding the orders. I just have always understood in the family orders amongst the parents that it's like man, woman, child, you know? And I wonder if you have any thoughts about, you know, man, woman kind of in that order, and can that never change? Could that be changing culturally? It's not the experience that I had or many people I know. So it's kind of like, you know, is that a thing that needs to be worked out, you know, or is that just the way it is?
Yeah, so obviously that's a huge conversation, and I'm mostly not going to go down that path. What I want to say is that that's part of the history of constellations. We have to honor that our dear founder comes from a very patriarchal culture, and a lot of his perspectives are imbued in the DNA of the work, and that primarily what I invite people, on the other hand, we're also learning our culture, Western culture, is just bursting with new understandings around gender roles, gender fluidity. We are just learning like maybe relearning might be the better way to put it, because, you know, indigenous cultures seem to have known a lot about this and we forgot, and now we're relearning, whatever it is. I mean, there's a lot coming up for us around this now. And when it comes to actual constellations, I invite you to be phenomenological.
Okay.
So that I mean, once you set up the family, does the father feel good? Does it feel good to everybody to have the man and the woman on this side or that the other side, if there's a man and a woman involved?
Mm-hmm.
Now, if we're talking about parents, we probably have at least a man and a woman, given limits of biology, in terms of, chromosomes and whatnot. But that's what I invite people to do.
Okay, so the orders in that way are not ironclad. It's kind of like, what feels right here?
I'm not quite sure I'd go completely that far, but I would act that way.
Okay.
Yeah. Mostly I'm punting a little bit because I don't want to go down that road too much today. That deserves a total workshop all by itself, which, by the way, Susie Tucker and Sarah Payton either have something coming up or are doing something really soon on gender, gender queerness, all kinds of stuff. And to deal with that superficially, I'd prefer to send you to a whole workshop and really chew on it for a day or two. But I recommend you work phenomenologically. See what the arrangement in the family seems really coherent with.
Thanks.
And watch your own blind spots. We just want to, if we have a strong opinion about these things, we might just want to notice when the system might be saying it wants to be set up a certain way. Okay, so, and I'm going to punt.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I posted it in the chat. Just, I was wondering about your bullet point list with the orders of love for the family, if that is a 1, 2, 3, or it's an options list.
It is not a hierarchy. The order of love with respect to honoring what is can kind of be considered like an umbrella. It almost includes all the others underneath it. But really what I've seen over and over and over and over and over again in constellations, the priority is what the constellation is kind of putting in your face. So for instance, in the example that I gave around seniority, the client needs to be small in the family versus dealing with the transgression. That particular hypothetical constellation is insisting that the transgression be dealt with first. Another example I offered up recently was dealing with massive ancestral trauma, let's just say the Holocaust. Sometimes you will notice in a constellation, the first thing you've got to deal with is the victim-perpetrator dynamic. Other times, the first thing you've got to deal with is just the unexpressed grief. The constellation will make it pretty clear. Often by trying to deal with the grief and then the victim-perpetrator thing keeps coming up, or vice versa. And then you realize you've got to look at the other thing. It's quite situational. But the constellation will lead you. Look for the disorder of love that's kind of irritating everybody the most. Might be the way to put it. Yeah.
I have another, actually, this is more like an observation.
Yeah.
You're saying how when there's layers of belonging and maybe a conflict, like between church and the soccer game, how that forces choices, and then a family has to decide based on their values. And I just, from a story perspective, man, that's the stuff of story right there. Being faced with a very difficult choice and your decision reveals your values, or you define your values, or something like that. Right there is the crux of all great story. So it's really helpful to just layer this stuff, and also just see the power of that conflict and why it helps us grow, or why it, I guess almost say, forces growth in one direction.
Or not. I mean, what I've often found is that for clients, the loyalty structures are so stabilized that they're not letting themselves choose because they're unwilling to be disloyal to anything. Now, this is very unconscious. This is not what's going on up here, but that's what's happening. And so, and often I think we can have a shorthand around sort of loyalty and belonging being a problem rather than it's all neutral. Yeah. These conflicts are just how it Bert, this I come back to this over and over and over and over and over again. Bert Hellinger, to be alive is to be guilty. There is no way to step into our full adulthood without violating belonging of something. Usually once a day. Right? You know, and instead of saying I won't feel guilty, I don't like feeling guilty, I'm going to push that away. What Bert Hellinger says is full maturity allows, like, I'm going to be guilty with respect to my daughter's soccer, and yeah, or with respect to church, whichever the church, the decision is, and to have some kind of full-hearted yes to that, and that's part of being human, is wrestling with these kinds of things. And anyone who's married someone with a different religion, every time the holidays come around, this is a bear. It's really difficult. Yeah. Okay, I think I'm going to invite you into.
I had a question.
Okay, real quick.
Is that okay? Okay. I mean, so this stuff is for family specifically. Will you be going over, this kind of ordering for other types of systems?
I am not.
In this course?
No, I'm not. Sorry. Yeah, sorry. Don't have time for this. There are some really good organizational constellations books out there. And I do include it in my basic training. And anyone who wants to work with organizations, all I can say is get organizational constellation training. Jan Jakob Stam is offering 2 days in September online that I can recommend to anybody here through the I think it's the Minneapolis Constellations, Catherine Curran's group. But yeah, sorry, not what I can cover in this course. All I can do is alert you to it and seek more learning. Yeah. This is going to happen over and over in this class. Like I can feel this whole big thing and I can't, because I'm here to do one-on-one constellations with y'all. Okay, can we take a break? A quick pee break until 5 after, please. Make sure you get your figurines or your little items if you haven't done that yet, and set up a place to work. Yeah, I see some of you playing with the your webcam to see if you've got a spot that works well. Feel free to do that. You're not required to train your camera there now because we're still going to do a few things before you go into groups. But if you want to, you know, place your camera on the spot to see what it looks like, feel free to do that.
I just looked up that Susie Tucker, the LGBTQIA one. It already happened on the 17th and 18th. Maybe we can get recordings.
Sorry.
Yeah, that sucks. Maybe she'll do recordings.
There was somebody else who was doing one too. I remember thinking, oh, everyone's doing that now. I don't remember who it was. It might have been Sarah Payton. It might be Sarah Payton. She's always doing stuff. Might have been somebody else. Okay, it's 5 after. Okay, so I'm going to do a short talk on working with figurines. Figurines, this is what I'm calling them, but I don't even have figurines. They're just small items. Yeah, this is what I wanted. There we go. Okay, so why use this approach? I find every year there's about, I don't know, about 25% of the group who goes, this is the bee's knees for me. There's a subset of Constellation folk for whom they just love this. It can add a lovely concreteness. And it's probably the best way online to really capture the three-dimensionality. So who's behind who, who's next to who, that's trickier to do with the other formats. It can be really evocative. Lots of therapists are already doing Santre therapy, so they have a lot of stuff, and it is connected to that work. One of the coolest workshops I ever went to at one of our conferences was a child psychologist who was doing constellations with children who were transgender and transitioning. And she used Santre therapy with these kids. It was beyond brilliant. It was amazing work she was doing. And it can be especially good for clients with physical challenges because they can just sit there and look at it. Yeah. So what does it require? Not much. A tabletop, a clear, uncluttered constellation space. If online, you need a good clear view of the figurines. This is the same thing as if you're going to do the footprint one. Please don't skimp. If you're going to work with clients, make sure they can see what you're doing. It is really important. And then some objects of some sort. Types of objects. The original format that was first created for was Playmobil figurines. Their advantage is that they're really bendable in ways that are really quite nice. Their downsides is that after a while, people noticed they were very white, and that's not cool. But various kinds of dolls. There's a beautiful set you can get for a lot of money from the people at African Constellations in South Africa. They're really beautiful. Stones, pieces of paper, or chips. Jane Peterson has her relationships, which she likes because in organizations, figurines and stones are weird, but you can use chips and you won't seem too weird. Almost anything will work. The first time I got exposed to this approach was at a conference in San Francisco in 2011 with a woman who we all sort of gathered around this little table. It was a little tricky at the workshop, but we all gathered around this table to watch her work with a client whose history was Ukrainian. And the constellation ended up, it was really a nice demo constellation because it ended up involving all of the war dead for the Ukraine who died in the millions of starvation and war and oppression. And there's this beautiful, beautiful moment where she represented all the ancestors in war who were standing there, and because they were Playmobil figurines, she could like sort of bend the legs and whatnot, and very slowly and respectfully, when the time came to honor their deaths, she just took these standing little figures and laid them one at a time on the ground. It was like a burial. It was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. And I was crying. And I went, oh, Galeoskis, this works. This is the field. I'm feeling it. And the client was feeling it. It was gorgeous. So really great way to work. What does this approach add? As I said, if you take to this approach, it can be a really personal way of doing the work. This is something that's interesting. The symbolism of the objects. If you use standard figurines or stones, there's not so much of this. But if you work with crystals or sand tray items that can be, little dragons and horses and people and swords and blah, blah, blah. The choosing, a dragon to represent your father and, a toad to represent your mother, the symbolism can now actually become another layer. Kathleen was basically pointing to that in her talking about the pictures she was exchanging with her colleague. You and the client can do it together, and I'll say a word about that in a moment. And it can slow things down and allow the two of you together to look at the arrangement in a reflective way. I really like doing this career coaching. When people are making really big decisions, it's like you can make a movement and then look at it and then make a movement and look at it. It's kind of nice. Some considerations. Who works with the objects? So this is similar to the question we were dealing with before. In person, it's really interesting. If you do this in person, you can both manipulate the objects, right? You can both sit around a coffee table and both interact with the objects. I've done this, not in a long time, but it's lovely. So in some sense, you don't have to decide who's in charge in a way. When you're online, then you're gonna have to start making some decisions. My directions around setup today have been assuming that you are going to do the constellation on your side for the client, but that's not necessarily the case, right? You may have gathered all this stuff for your constellation on your side, right? One of the things Jane Peterson likes to do is she says, go get a bowl and just gather up a lot of little objects in the home. And then she has clients do the constellation on their side with the stuff that they put into the bowl. So it's just something you need to think about and work with. Now, again, I use stones a lot, which I'll demonstrate in a second. So what kind of objects you can choose is whether, do they have a face that indicates direction? If they're not sort of person kinds of things, or animal kinds of things, that don't have a front and a back, then you might have to decide, yeah? As I said, the symbolism of the objects, it can be lovely, but it can also be a downside. Again, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, and I found that sometimes the symbolism of the objects can be overinterpreted. So sometimes having neutral, similar, standard objects can have some usefulness. The receptivity of your client to this approach, some people find it woo-woo. Most people take to it. It can be an especially nice fit for people who have home altars, collect objects, are attracted to symbolism, etc. And all I can say is remember to stay in the constellations frame, thinking systemically and with the orders of love. I do find this is one of the formats where people can start going off in symbolic directions that may lose track that we're actually dealing with some systemic principles that are important. And then it's not really a constellation anymore. You're doing something else, which may be valuable, but it's not that. It may be just working with the images of the unconscious in other kinds of ways. That's cool stuff and lovely and important and useful, but it's not necessarily constellations work. Okay, so at this point, that's all fairly straightforward stuff, basically raising up some of the differences with the format that we used last time. So at this point, once again, I'm going to invite someone to volunteer, remembering you don't mind being recorded, modest chunk size, simple system, and you don't mind if there isn't a full-hearted resolution. So if you're feeling like that, I need a volunteer.
I can volunteer.
I think I saw Sheila's hand go up a second before I heard you speak, Beth.
No.
No, Sheila, so we got Sheila, we got Beth. Diane, did you put up your hand or were you just moving your hand? Yeah. Okay, so Sheila, Beth, and Diane, just in one sentence. What's the thing so I can choose somebody?
For me, it's a disconnect with somebody I consider to be my sister, but is not in my biological family.
Okay, thank you.
For me, it's this thing that came up in the conversation with my friend this morning, where I say to someone, hey, this thing hurt me, and the person somehow blames me, or it becomes my fault that my feelings are hurt.
Okay. Thank you.
For me, I would like to look at work obligations and being pulled kind of in opposite directions or different directions.
Thank you. Oh, these are all really good for figurine work. I just want to say thank you to all three of you for coming up with issues that kind of have a simple enough structure that I don't need to do a really big interview with you to have something to set up. So thank you. And I think I'll work with Sheila just because you were clobbered before we got on the phone. So let's see if we can give you a little bit of relief. And thank you to Diane and Beth a whole lot for raising your hands and the vulnerability that goes into raising your hand at all. My apologies. The way I have this set up, first off, I do want to offer this up as an example, which involves a separate camera. Please do not think, oh, now I have to get a separate camera. You don't. You don't have to get a separate camera. I just like having something that's really clean and separate. If you have your camera just focused on a corner of your desk, that's fine. As long as it can be well seen. That's all I'm asking, okay? But I'm gonna, Sheila, you're not gonna see my face. Instead, you're gonna see the platform. And you referenced a personal pattern or sort of a larger thing you feel like you're wrestling with. For right now, I'm going to put that aside. Not that it isn't important, it is, but I just want to start out with you, and this is a friend?
Yeah, used to be my neighbor before I moved.
Shall we call, do I call this your friend or your neighbor or your, what do I call it? So I'm using the right word.
Yeah, friend.
Okay.
Friend word.
Can you choose an object for you and an object for your friend? So start out with you, please.
Yeah, hold on. Let me
Oh, and let me spotlight me. And I will. There we go.
Okay. I'm really drawn to the piece with the two holes in it for me.
Okay, and whereabouts would we put this?
A little bit towards the camera and a little towards the corner near you. Yes.
Is that good enough?
That's good enough.
Okay, and for your friend?
Is that one kind of blue and swirly?
This one?
Yeah.
Okay, and where would you, and I'm just starting from kind of a neutral spot. Where would you like this?
A little towards you. Not quite so far. And maybe a little down towards the camera. Yeah, right about there.
Which way, I mean, are these two looking at each other, away from each other?
I have a sense that so if I'm the bottom one, that I'm looking towards the corner of the table. Yeah, down, and that the person is behind me.
Looking at you?
Looking at me, yeah.
Okay. So I want to tell you, in my body, and this is what I do with constellations, this is for everybody, that immediately felt bad and creepy. I mean, I just immediately had a, ooh, something's coming up on me kind of feeling. How does that land for you when I share that, Sheila?
Yeah, I mean, the experience is really icky.
Right, and there's no way I can keep you from referring back to the conversation this morning, but to the degree you can stay present to this, and I know that'll be tricky because it just happened. But as you look at this and I name the feeling of like someone creeping up on you, does that resonate or not?
You mean, does that feeling resonate with my response to the table?
Yeah.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for clarifying that, actually.
Yeah, to the degree, I mean, again, something happens so quickly, the person's going to keep referring back to it and we understand. And to the degree we can help coach them to stay present to the unfolding of this system, we want to sort of help them with that a little bit. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to do one simple move and tell me how this feels in your body when I do it. This is not a fix or anything like that, but this is just something I'm wanting to do in my body. So I'm wanting to move away and turn and face.
I breathe.
Okay, good. I mean, we now have a new problem.
I also am a little scared. It's a little scary.
You're in a corner, right? But it felt like it gave some relief to this. And scared what, at facing this or, and you can keep yourself unmuted.
No, sorry, I was trying to change the view because it's really, it's distracting for me seeing myself on the screen, and I was trying to see if I could hide myself view because you have the videos pinned, I think, for the recording.
Just take it off.
There we go.
Yeah, that's fine.
Couldn't figure it out. Okay, so now that that's happened, Leslie, what was the question?
What's the fear at finally facing this one? What's the fear?
I don't have a story about it yet. It was just when you said what's the feeling, I was like, oh, there's a there's a fluttery feeling in sort of diaphragm chest area that I interpret as fear.
Okay.
I didn't.
Okay. Yeah. So
something bad's gonna happen. Something bad is gonna happen.
yeah. Okay, so often what I might consider doing here, I'm just sharing my process with the group, is I might inquire into what it is Sheila is actually afraid of that's getting projected onto the friend. But I'm actually feeling moved to do something different from that, which is what is the friend projecting onto Sheila? And there's always cross, it's not an either or. There's usually a cross projection on. But if there is such a thing, if we have a theory that there is such a thing, what of these objects would you like me to use for whatever it is that actually your friend is upset about?
The fan-shaped shell.
The big one?
You think so? Maybe.
Whoa.
It's interesting. It's hard for me to choose this one. The others were very clear. This one's a little harder to pick.
Well, and my own reaction, as much as I'm surprised, that's a reaction of surprise. It seems to confirm, because the unexpected is often right. And then immediately I go, well, that makes sense. Your friend's dealing with something big, and then I want to cry. Like, it's not just a modest thing. She's dealing with something really big. So I'm going to have her turn and face it.
When I have the tears, Leslie, and I get angry too.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. The moves here are not about, we're trying to get the client to have compassion for this other person. That's not, there's no agenda here. We just want the system, given your question before, to come into better order so you can have some relief. Yeah. So how does it feel to have your friend facing this big thing?
I feel something's happening on my back. Like I got like kind of a cool feeling up and down my back, and I'm really aware of the space behind me. I don't know I don't know if that's about the friend facing the thing, but it.
So I'm just going to have you turn and face what's behind you.
Tears and more scary, and that actually felt a little fast.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
I want to model that for everybody here. I made a mistake, but there's in a sense no mistake. If you just, it's self-feedback. Yeah. So does that mean you want me to do it just slower or not do it at all?
It's really important that you asked.
Yeah.
I actually just need a minute with that.
Okay.
This is familiar. Would you be willing to actually ask the question again?
If you know which question, feel free to feed it to me.
Okay, I think the question.
I mean, the last question I asked is, do you still want me to turn it around but slower? But I'm not sure if that's the one you're referring to.
I mean, I'm feeling very self-conscious now, but the question that I want to be asked is it okay? Is it okay if I turn this piece around?
Is it okay if I turn this piece around?
um, Part way, like 90 degrees would be good.
90 degrees this way or 90 degrees that way?
That way, the way it is. Yeah, I have a very real sense of if I were actually standing there, that it's important for my safety to be able to see both of the things at the same time.
Got it.
The thing on my right and the thing on my left that was behind me.
So I'm going to share. I had a very strange reaction to this, and can I share it with you?
Yes.
So I've been treating this side as your nose. Yeah?
Yeah, that's how I'm seeing it. Yeah.
But when we, these two holes, which are a little evocative of eyes. Yeah? I mean, this rock has represented all kinds of things over the years. But right now they're a little evocative of eyes. And all of a sudden, it's almost like this representative wants to say something like, my face is different than what you thought.
My face is different than what you thought.
Like your nose is like, I don't know, it's something got fundamentally reframed. And it feels much better to see this as the nose than as that is the nose. Now, direction facing is a different issue. But I felt enormous relief when I began to see this as your nose rather than this. Whichever direction you face. Is this landing for you at all, or is this way too?
No, it is. It's hard to find words, but it connects for me to this sense that it feels very familiar of like things are not quite what they seem, or there's something else going on here that I can't quite see, but I can feel, or and I'm the only one who can feel it, or like it's seen but not said, or it's said but not, there's like it's when you said that, I went from the micro situation, like I felt like I stepped back and something went, whoa, like
yeah, me too. And although it doesn't answer the question and keeps you in the mystery, it's like someone coming into the system and the kids saying something's not included, something's not included, something's not being talked about. And the person comes in and is not able to say what's not being included, but they at least affirms the child's sense that something's not being included. Yeah?
Yeah.
That move. So we don't know what it is yet, but at least you're getting affirmed.
Yeah.
Right, you're not crazy.
Right.
Something's missing.
Right, that sentence, I'm not crazy. That's like an ongoing theme.
Yeah. You betcha. So for the demo's purpose, obviously I want to work with you another hour on this. May you have a brilliant co-practitioner who on the next step, but I'm going to do one move here. Hopefully it's not too abrupt. Okay, let me know if it is. What I want to do is just bring in what's missing. Okay. and let you be able to look at that. And this stays present because it's important, but it doesn't take up all the space. And I'm not jamming your face in this, I'm keeping it over here. But we can just acknowledge that I'm not crazy. This is here. Whatever that is.
Yeah, no, that lands well. And I have some tears, and I immediately want to like take what's missing, and like I wanted to like stack stuff up. I wanted to like use all the other rocks. I picture like green confetti or something. I was like some glitter on there and some like, yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
We can do that. I don't know any glitter, and I don't like glitter in my house, but because where once you bring in glitter, that's it. But we'll leave it like that for now, okay?
Okay.
Okay. And just honor the main piece is this movement. Like my nose is here, not there. And I'm not quite sure why that's so important, but it is. Okay. My face is not where you thought it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I want to say to the group, I don't know why that's important. I can't quite track what's important about that, but it's important. I can, it's important. And I'm okay with letting it be a little unknown. Yeah. Can we leave it here, Sheila?
I would like to make one comment about that, and then if that's all right.
Yeah.
And feel free to elaborate on this if it serves or not. I often have this experience in constellations where they are ambiguous, and it's not like, oh, and we're going to put in your mother and your school and your, it's often this sort of a little frustrating because I'm left, it doesn't tie up very tidily, and it almost asks more questions than it answers. And
so that is a common pattern, and we'll acknowledge that you teed yourself up for that a little bit, right?
What?
You teed yourself up for it a little bit, right? The agreement is you might have an unresolved constellation.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Yeah. So we'll notice this pattern's really important somehow, and we'll really honor that and hope that you have a space or a platform where it doesn't have to feel this incomplete. Yeah. And to honor that the work you do with a fellow student in the next hour and a half could also be not a full tight resolution, because again, that's part of what comes along with doing classes. Right? Without it having to mean, oh, here I go again. This is what's happening to me again. Yeah. And I know you and I are talking separately about doing a full constellation, which is a better format for addressing that. Yeah. So I totally honor that. I've shared that pattern myself. Totally honor that. Can we, having honored that, leave that here for now?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you, Sheila. Okay. Oh, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Sheila. So Sheila, just take a few minutes. Let yourself come back to the present moment. You're a wonderful grounding kitty. And everyone here, just some intention with Sheila to be able to come back to herself as I kind of move on. So thank you for offering that up, Sheila. So, I want to offer up that, again, we could have done this on Sheila's side, right? She could have been the one moving the objects. To the degree that she and I worked together, I was, saying, where do you want this? Which object do you want to choose? But again, that you can work with that in a way that, play with this as feels good to you. Okay. This is, again, there's a lot of room for trying this different ways. So in a moment, I'm going to put you all in 2 small groups. And you're going to have a whole bunch of time, 30 minutes each. But before I do that, I just want to ask any logistical questions about what I'm inviting you to do for the next hour together. Yeah, I think Christina has her hand up.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I think I have the kind of the assumption that we, put the 2 figurines on the board or however many, and then we sort of like feel into one or feel into another. And what I observed you doing there was more of feeling into the big picture. And I wonder if you have anything to share about that, like making that decision. Do you sometimes sort of feel more specifically into one object or another? And do you have a way of doing that particularly?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I'm going to completely put her aside. I think you have seen me perhaps work more like, oops, no, that's not what I wanted. This is what I wanted. This is person A and this is person B. Yeah. And then I feel this one and I go, person A is angry and wants to hurt person B. And then I touch person B and I go, oh, person B scared and wants to run away. Yeah. Yes, you're feeling into the individual roles and you are always feeling into the whole system. That's just part of what you're doing as a facilitator. Is it tense? Is it claustrophobic? Is it low energy? Is it comfortable and relaxed? There's always kind of a moving back and forth between, even when you're working with a group, focusing on a specific representative and their report and what's going on with them, and then stepping back and looking at what's going on here.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Or little subsections, these 2 out of the big group, that sort of thing. So yeah, yes.
I wondered about like feeling into these inanimate objects. It's different than having your feet on the floor like you would with, the paper, or obviously with people who have feelings. So I saw, then you put your finger on it. So is the finger important to like?
It's important to me. It may be to you.
Yeah. Okay.
You're gonna have to play with it a little bit. Touching it it's got a somatic quality, right? It's bringing your soma, but you may find you don't need that or you don't do that. If you're really feeling like you're doing this, like, oh my God, I need some scaffolding. I'm just starting. I've never done this. Then just, touch, just touch each one. And remember, the other option is to have it on the client side. And then they're doing most of the representing and feeling of the system, although you're now doing it at a distance too. You are also feeling the system, but you're not going to be able to touch the stone if it's on the other person's side. Yeah. Yeah, Suzanne.
So Leslie, is it advisable just to ask the person you're working with whether they'd like to use their own objects or whether they'd like to use yours?
Sure. Of course. And I do want to, it is okay as a facilitator to have a preference. One of the things you need to make sure you're doing is giving yourself as much of the things that strengthen you as a facilitator as you can. So I'll give you an example. The other day I had a client, I'm still not doing in-person work. And someone just asked me, would I come to her home And I felt into it and I went, that is going to, I'm not going to be as strong a facilitator if I do that in your home. So I get why you would like that. I totally honor it. And I'm not going to be the strongest facilitator if I do it in your space. So just it is okay to do what is most strengthening for you as a facilitator. And then within that, having a lot of room for options is great. Yeah. Yeah, Susan, I know I'm tracking time. Thank you. Laura, you have your hand up.
Really quick, my question is related. Say you decide to have the figurines on your side. Do you ever ask the client like what they're experiencing when you touch one, for example? I know you ask the client a lot, is this landing for you? I'm not sure if I caught if you're asking them for other information that they're getting.
Yeah, no, all kinds of questions. So you have the arrangement, it's set up, and you can just say, what are you noticing? What are you feeling?
Okay.
Absolutely. Asking all those questions.
Okay.
The dilemma with doing a demo, I mean, the strength of doing a demo is you have a demo. The dilemma is that it leaves out all the other options for how it could have unfolded.
Okay.
Some of these questions are pulling out ways I think you maybe have seen figurines or imagined figurines being worked with that didn't show up in that demo. By all means, include those. You bet. Yeah.
Sorry, one very small question. So when you were asking her a feeling, I didn't hear you specifically asking her to step into each role, or you stepping into each
I
role?
could.
Okay.
I didn't. But again, that's another example of something that could have happened. We got into a systemic pretty quickly that I needed to tend to as the facilitator. So I was really in an interaction with Sheila most of the time. Yeah, and tending to what was showing up for her. And she was on the move. Stuff was happening for her. So I was mostly being there for her as things were arising for her, and then, coaching her into the next movement. We didn't do tons of actual constellation work, but we did a lot. I mean, it's almost a little bit more like chair work that you saw. Yes, all of the above. Okay, I'm going to put you all into groups, 30 minutes each. Who here? Layla says she's not feeling well. Layla, do you want to be in a group? And anybody else not want to be in a group? Alex, you don't want to be in a group?
Yeah, I'm too. My energy suddenly just all drained. Just feel.
Okay. Do you want to observe a group?
Yeah, I would rather just observe.
I'm sorry, can't quite hear.
I would rather just observe if I may.
Okay. And Layla, how are you doing?
I have a lot of pain, so I will just lay down and observe if it's okay. But I'm camera off because I have to lay down.
Okay. Anyone else who prefers not to participate? Okay. So I have to get permission because some people don't like to be watched.
Sure.
Are there 4 people who are open to having observers? And I really want to say this, if you've decided to be an observer, you have to stay an observer. Just because the other 2 people have sort of signed up for 30 minutes, okay? So Beth is open to it, okay? Anybody else? Kathleen? Those are the 2 ones from last time too. Fiona and Christina, thank you. Okay. And I'm going to try and keep people who are in 3s, other than the 3s who just offered up, out of 3s, and try and mix you up. But if you're with the same person, forgive me, I can't infinitely prevent that. So let's see what the breakout rooms do. So you just give me a couple minutes here. It always takes a couple minutes for me to do this.
Leslie, I had a question.
I'm sorry, give me 1 second. I'm deep in process. I will catch you before I send you into rooms. I'm easily distractible. Okay, there's one proper group of 3. So just watch your time a little bit. Okay, Kathleen, what's your question? And then I'll send you all into rooms.
Okay, good. So just what are we doing? Are we each facilitating one-on-one and trading 2 people with an observer? Okay.
Exactly, exactly. So there is one proper group of 3. It's Andrea, Brandy, and Roxanne. You're gonna have to split up the time, basically 20 minutes each. But everybody else is in a group of 2, some of you with an observer. So 30 minutes each, okay? Sending you all out. The help button is there if you need help.
Sorry. So Fiona, I'm in it.
It's a very unfortunate new voice. I understand why it's there. But when you forget and all of a sudden it starts to... Okay, here they all come. Hey, so thank you everyone for diving into that. So before I invite some shares or questions, you got your homework, okay? So find a friend or a client to do this with in the next week if you can. If you're a coach or something, you might just like, can I set up a few things, you know, and see if it's useful. Obviously not artificially, but if it feels organic to the work that you're doing. And if for whatever reason that's not possible, then again, this is something you can do for yourself. Yeah. But for anyone who's feeling shy about this, reaching out to a friend, you know, they're like, oh, I would love to look at why I'm fighting with my brother. That would be great. And chances are you will do no harm. You'll help them see more. Yeah. So I invite you to be bold about that, as long as you're upfront about the fact that you're practicing. That's all. You just have to be sort of honest about that. Shares, miracle cures, questions, elegant, useful failures. What showed up? Yeah, Beth.
I really didn't know what I was doing at first when I was working with Christina. And I really wanted her to be the one to manipulate all of her objects because I wanted to practice that as well. But I also really felt like I was in the dark for a while, where I was just feeling into each moment, and then I would feel into the next moment, into the next moment. So, but then it ended up being lovely, and it was so surprising. So I was a little bit on the edge of like, what the hell am I doing? So I just wanted to report back because uh, it's it, I felt more certain when I was practicing with the papers and stuff. Somehow that was way more familiar, but this had a little edge quality to it, like, oh, how do I do this? What do I ask them to do? Now what? You know? Yeah.
Good. And I know that just partly comes with doing something new, but also, and I know you already know this, but I'll say it for the whole group, getting friendly with not knowing is the number one requirement for being a good facilitator. Because if you got to know what's going on all the time, then the field cannot reveal any new information for you. You've already decided what's going on. So those, believe me, it happens to me. It may not be obvious to the rest of the group, but there's multiple times in every constellation where I'm like, I don't have a clue. I don't know what's going on here, and I have no idea where this is going to go. And the only difference for me and folks like me is that we found that we can trust that's perfectly fine, and that something will show up. And again, to trust that the field is friendly and wants to support the unfolding. Some of us have some trauma around not knowing. Yeah, we may have had teachers who were not nice to us, or parents, or whatever, where not knowing was punished. So sometimes there's some healing that needs to happen around that. I don't know, I have no idea. This has been put in my hands and I don't know. That's not okay. I can't not know. And the nice byproduct of getting comfortable with it is it's healing. We get healing around it being okay to not know. Yeah. Thank you for that, Beth. Other shares, Suzanne, and I think Tammy was about to put her hand up.
That was really useful. Yeah, that was really useful, Leslie. Where I find myself not getting drawn in, but often someone will want to know, well, what are you? What do you represent? A particular thing, wanting to know. To understand, and like, I don't know, and I just share what I'm noticing. But so is that a trap, for the client to want to know what that is? Because then you're sort of making it something. I don't know. I just, because I want to be helpful. Yeah. And my impulse, not my impulse, I can't make it be something because I just don't know. Yeah.
So there are myriad paradoxes in this work, right? So many of us have had constellations in which a great mystery has been unlocked, and something we didn't know forever, now we know. And that's amazing. That's really healing. Other times, there are these moments in constellations where we get kind of informed by the ancestors, or just generally by the constellation. There's something that we're not going to know. And how do we bow to that and be okay with the fact that we're never going to know, what was it between our parents that made them hate each other so much? Or what was it, grandpa died under mysterious circumstances. What actually happened, right? There's a certain sort of humility around honoring that there are things beyond what we're going to know. And so that's always this is a facilitator thing around acknowledging those moments where we're about cracking up open a mystery, and times when we're just bowing to a mystery. And many constellations are a combination of both, right? And you can feel the movement that's being called for usually, at a certain point. Now, what we always want to do when someone wants to know something that for whatever reason, either for right now or forever, we're not going to know, it should be just for now, we're not going to know, like, yeah. But for whatever reason, is to really honor the desire to know. Yeah, that's really human, it's really natural. You know, a little bit with Sheila earlier, the desire for, you know, some more resolution than we had. I respect that. I really honor that and acknowledge we're functioning under certain limits right now, maybe. Yeah. And that's all of, I mean, I always say there's two things that constellations do. One is it rearranges things so that things come into better order. It's a fixie sort of thing. And the other thing it does is it doesn't change anything, but we find the capacity to bow to things as they are. Those are both movements and constellations. Sometimes we're rearranging and oh my God, finally the thing is fixed. And other times it stays exactly the way it is, but now we can bow to it. So, and again, most constellations are a bit of both. Yeah. Thanks. I think I saw a couple of other hands go up, but Fiona, I think, had one. Maybe Tammy had one. Fiona. And again, we're going to go about 5 minutes long. I hope that's okay for folks.
Yeah, I was working with Kathleen, and it started with a small sentence that my granddaughter said, and then it turned into this quite systemic generational thing, transgenerational thing.
Yeah.
And at one point she brought out this mask, which had a kind of a real magical kind of power to it. So I just wanted to kind of acknowledge that the power in the actual object.
Yeah.
To know that any other object wouldn't really have done the job, like.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. Particularly when you start bringing into these, if the client's the one who has the objects, and they start bringing in, thank you, Brandy. I honor that you need to leave. Thank you. You know, ancestral heirlooms and things like that, if it's being done on the client side. So yes, the objects themselves can have some power. Francesca Mason-Borian has talked about this. Please don't be culturally appropriative, but she's Native American and she talks about smudging and the notion that there are these ancient technologies that actually move energy and make things happen. I'm not sure I would do that because, you know, it hasn't been kind of bestowed upon me as a practice. But there are, yes, objects of power and movements of power. For, you know, my background, you know, the bread and the wine, they're powerful, right? They have a power on their own. This sacramental is what we would call it in the Christian tradition. Yeah. Thank you. Roxanne's got to head out too. I had one other hand, and then I think I need to bring it to a close because people are needing to leave, and then that feels funny when we stick around and people are needing to leave. But one other person had their hand up. No, Tammy, did you have your hand up? No. Okay, Susan, real quick, because I really want to honor. I don't want people to feel like they have to leave us.
Yeah, I don't need to. I don't need to say my question.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Appreciate that. So everybody, just take a moment. Let's come to a close here. I would love to chew the fat with you all for another 30 minutes. I love doing that. But just take a moment and review what we did today. We started out by acknowledging the land. And I talked about the orders of love and belonging and conscience. And then we learned a bit about figurines and we worked with Sheila in the group. And then the work you just did with each other. So take a moment, allow something that is an image, an insight, an aha, a question. That's your gift from this last 3 hours. And then turn that into a sentence if you can. And popcorn real quickly, just lean forward and share your sentence. What's your gift for today?
I feel relief. Thank you.
The gift of not knowing.
Yeah.
I take the time to not know.
I just want to say thank you.
Seeing is healing.
There is no way to step into adulthood without violating some belonging.
I can step into my power.
I'm curious about how to do this technique a little better.
We're wandering in the mystery, but there is some structure.
Grateful for learning opportunities.
Grateful for the chance to practice.
Being okay with taking it one step at a time.
I can't find the words.
Faithfulness and sincerity.
Grateful for this learning opportunity.
Hope you feel better, Layla.
Thank you.
I think that's it. Is that everybody? Okay. Lean forward, unmute. Messy goodbye.
Bye.
Very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you. Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye, guys. See you next week.
Leslie, could you hang out for 1 sec?
Sure, Sheila.
I just thought it would be easier. I got your email about the 2-hour session.
Yeah.
And I went back and checked my receipt, and I signed up for the regular session. So I think it's really interesting that, and then we did this work, and then you said, "Oh, you have this, you have this piece to do."
So let me look it up. Do you have a second for me to just, because obviously I don't have, I for some reason I was remembering that we did. I could easily be wrong, because there are a bunch of you, and there gets to be overlaps.
I mean, because I don't know where I'm going to be living after next Tuesday. So in terms of scheduling a thing, I have no idea. Like, I may or may not be driving across the country in my car that's a little broken. I may, like, I'm moving from Washington to Maine, and anyway, it's just like I got a lot going on, and I may be interested in taking you up on that, but I don't have a sense that I can even schedule
Because
it.
you made a deposit for $300.
No, it's $225.
You did. Okay.
I'm looking at it.
I believe you. I believe you. So I have a spreadsheet that I enter everybody's stuff. And again, I could have put the wrong thing in there. Well, PayPal wants me to tell me how many crosswalks are in the picture. Because that's where I have to look definitively for this. It'll take me 2 secs.
Okay.
If you have a minute, might as well resolve this now. Just gets a little slow when I'm running Zoom. Okay, so July 9th. Well, lordy, 225. Let me just see. Yep, 225. And you worry me because I'm wondering if I swapped you with someone else.
Yeah, I'm wondering the same thing.
So now that I'm going to have to track, like, did someone else pay on the same day?
Right. And so, I mean, I might be interested in adding that on. And I think if I understand right, I can do that before the end of the course. I just can't schedule it now. Like I said, I think I'm driving across the country and I don't know when. And I'm trying to find somebody to fly with my cats because they hate the car. But like, I don't know, I might have to buy a new car before I can drive to Maine. Like, it's burning oil. I don't have a place to live after Tuesday. Literally, like, have no home. Everything's in storage.
Yeah.
Like, off I go. So like, I just can't.
No. There's a little bit of to add another wrench. It's not just simply pay by the end of the course. I am asking people to use these sessions by the end of the course.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, I can't schedule it now. I just can't do it.
Yeah.
Like, if everything goes well and I drive across the country, I probably will not be in class next Tuesday, but maybe I will.
Yeah.
You know, this is what's happened to my life. And,
yeah, you can let me know. The only dilemma, I mean, last minute is a perfectly fine decision to make, except to the degree that my calendar can get filled.
Right.
And I have to say, my calendar is getting filled towards the end of the course. Right now, yeah, that's the part of the problem, is that a lot of people start signing up for these classes, and then during this class, my docket is packed in a way that is not normally.
Yeah.
But you can always inquire, and I might be open to making an exception or something. And then if you want to do it in the short term, then maybe there's something we could do sooner. But that's all for you to weigh. For now, what I need to do is correct the misinformation in my spreadsheet. You're a regular student, as they say, and I'll do a little hunting and see if I confused you with someone else.
I mean, the thing that did happen is you gave me an extra day to sign up with the discount because I was traveling. So I bought it at whatever normal price was, but I think it was $50 off that I'll owe for the balance.
My apologies. I'm sorry, I'll answer that question. Give me 1 second. I'm just looking at something else. Yeah, okay. Okay. So ask that question again. I'm sorry, I was just double checking something.
I was just saying that the thing that did happen with my registration that was a little out of the ordinary was that you gave me an extra day to sign up at the discounted price. So
yeah,
I think
that I think I have correct. In fact, I mean, what I have written down is you deposited $300 in premium too. So that's the error. Yeah, no, I know I extended an extra day too. No worries on that. So the second installment should be correct, which would be
there's a lot of numbers.
Yeah, I'd have to do the math. I should never do math on the fly because I end up saying the wrong thing, and then that confuses everybody.
Right. So I am.
But thank you for catching me on that, and my apologies for the error.
Yeah, no problem. So I'm understanding correctly that I can come back next week and say, okay, great, I would like to add a constellation, and then I can schedule that before the end of the course, which is 5 weeks.
So the last day is August 10th.
Okay.
And at this point, if all goes well, I'm actually getting out of Dodge on the 12th for a while. So, and if for any reason, I mean, if you sign up next week, it's not a problem. We'll figure out a place to put you in my schedule. you know, even if I have to kind of open up some office hours I don't currently have in order to fit you in, that's not a problem. The closer we get to the 10th, that gets a little trickier.
Yeah.
Just because, you know, I'm trying to find time to pack and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm also leading some workshops that week, which is probably grand foolishness. How are you? Yeah.
I mean, I'm trying to figure out how to get myself and 2 cats and some houseplants across the country in a Subaru that's burning oil.
Yeah.
So I'm about how you could expect,
Yeah.
given the, you know.
Well, mostly I was just wondering about having cracked open your shell a few hours ago.
Oh, that's normal.
But you seem to have moved on a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, it's a thing. And you know, Dulcie, it's not so much we didn't finish it as like my constellations are always like pretty esoteric. You know, it's like the monkey from the dream and the fairy princess and the, you know what I mean, the raven. And I think it was 4 years I did constellations before I even got chosen to represent a person.
Wow.
So I was like anger or the river of blood, or I don't know what that is, but it seems to need to be here, you know. And so that's part of the, you know, that's more the thing. I'm like, all right.
I got it. Yeah. This is, sometimes I feel like I'm also training clients to, you know, I mean, obviously, especially in classes, we want clients to allow their facilitators to do stuff. On the other hand, clients also get to make requests. And this might be a stage, whether you get one from me or somebody else, to say, I've got this issue that I want to look at, and I want to use real people.
Mm-hmm.
And you can ask that. Now, the facilitator might overrule you, but you can make, like, you can say, I seem to have a lot of constellations that go kind of abstract and they're lovely and wonderful, but I think there may be something going on systemically that real people don't show up. Could we kind of bring some intention to that? Mm-hmm. I'll do that in constellations all the time. If there's a trend in constellations that's expressing some meaning, like I'll just like, oh, damn it, we're bringing in your father. I don't care. Hell with the field. We're bringing him in. Not quite that extreme.
You mean if you've done a bunch of constellations with one person and there's a theme?
I'm sorry, say that again.
You mean if you have done a bunch of constellations with one person and you notice a theme, or like you've had them done for yourself and you notice a theme?
If anyone notices that there's a certain tendency in constellations where the client has done a bunch and they notice it about their constellations, or I've been working with them and I notice, you know, we're not dealing with your people at all. Mm-hmm. Not generally what happens with me, because I tend usually to prefer doing ancestral stuff in the beginning with people. But if it seems to keep happening, or however it shows up, basically I'm just saying that if there's something that you would like to experience in constellations, you're free to ask.
Yeah. Yep.
You know, I mean, for years I noticed that facilitators seem to get pulled in to, I mean, there was a pattern I saw in constellations, and I said, could we not do that?
For you, for your own.
For me. Yeah, it was like we'd get halfway through and they say, we can't work with this. And then they completely bring in all the representatives and start all over. And I'm like, could we not do that anymore?
Huh.
It feels like interrupted foreplay or something. Like, we're going somewhere. Look, we're going somewhere. No. So you can ask. You can just ask. Yeah. So that's just to say that. Sorry, I've been teaching for 3 hours and my brain is not very well contained right now, and I can tell it in the way I'm chatting with you. So if you want a constellation, you let me know, and I will fix that mistake in your spreadsheet.
Got it.
Okay. Yeah. And good luck with all of your moving stuff. I know how discombobulating that is.
Oh, God. I'm really scared. Like I moved a lot and usually I'm like, all right, it's cool. And this one has, I've had the 2 years from hell and this is like taking me out. So.
Got it. So it's like it's supposed to take you somewhere new, but the processes.
Yeah, it's like I'm like I gotta get out of here. Like whatever, I fell in a hole, which is I think as a result of doing constellations actually, which is like a whole other thing. And like we're not gonna go down there right now in this conversation, but I need to get out of here. And it's just like everything is, not everything. That's not accurate. There are many things making it very difficult for me to get out of here, and it's making it it increases the agitation, right? And then I'm like, oh God, is something bad gonna happen? Is my car gonna break down in Montana? Or my cat's gonna get sick? Or so I'm just really trying to, focus on where I'm going. Like going back to Maine. Like I felt really good in Maine for most of the time. Like my people are in Maine.
It's interesting. You say Maine and my body feels good. Something calms down when you say it as an expression of your meaning, not mine. You speak it and something grounds. So that makes sense to me that you're having that experience. Yeah. And just where is here that you're driving all the way to Maine from?
I am in Port Townsend, Washington.
Okay, that's a good long drive.
That's a good long drive.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you know anybody else who's doing that drive in the next week, let me know. Or flying, or because I would love to fly my cats. Like, hey, kind person, here you go. Like, I will give you the money.
There are websites for people who offer to do that sort of thing. I cannot direct you to a URL, but if you Google, someone, there are people like, I'm going from here to there, obviously they're gonna ask for some compensation or something, but there are sites that sort of mutual aid kind of thing where I happen to be doing this, and if you need it, so you might check it out.
Oh, that's
Google that.
I might.
It seems really arbitrary, Port Townsend to Maine specifically, but
or Pennsylvania, because that's where my mom is. But
somewhere in the area.
Over there.
Yeah, so you might check that out.
Okay.
Okay, well, good luck on that, and we'll be in touch. And thank you for following through on that sort of a logistical stumble on my end.
Okay, no problem.
Later.
Bye.